For a 30th consecutive year, there will be no Stanley Cup in Canada, with the Edmonton Oilers being eliminated last night by the Vegas Golden Knights. We'll discuss the breakdown of that, plus the Seattle Kraken and Dallas Stars get ready to battle in Game 7 tonight for a Western Conference final appearance against Vegas. Plus, we have all kinds of rumors from around the NHL, including the latest rumors on the Edmonton Oilers, the Toronto Maple Leafs, Ottawa Senators ownership situation, Calgary Flames GM situation, and the potential outcome of the Arizona Tempe bid as well. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a ton to cover today. First, I want to recap last night's playoff action, take a look ahead to Game 7 tonight between the Kraken and Stars, but we really do have a lot to cover in the rest of the video, so we'll try to keep this somewhat brief. But again, for the 30th consecutive year, Canada will not be hoisting a Stanley Cup. The Canadian teams are once again shut out, with the Edmonton Oilers being the last hope of losing last night in Game 6 against the Vegas Golden Knights, losing in a critical game, obviously go down 4-2. The Edmonton Oilers ended up losing this game basically, you could say, in the second period. Really, at the end of the day, that was the worst of it all. Vegas had a quick start, 24 seconds in, they scored. I mean, I don't know if it's just me, but I find sometimes the Oilers give up the weirdest goals and just have these odd defensive breakdowns, or they just don't get a save at the right time. I'm not saying their goalies are all bad and that the defense is terrible, but it has its moments where it's certainly the weak link of the team. That much we can say for certain, and all it takes is a couple of bad moments and it can derail the game. But the Oilers responded good. Even though they gave up that first goal in the first minute, they came back with a couple of quick goals. McDavid scored shortly after to make it 1-1. They get a goal not long after that from Warren Foegele. And we were off to the races. Everybody was thinking this was going to be like a 8-7, 9-8 type of game because of the amount of goals scored in the first 3-4 minutes of the first period. But things did settle down after that. Second period, though, the Oilers had some penalty trouble. They had some defensive breakdowns. And Jonathan Marchessault had a natural hat trick, scoring 3 straight goals. So even though the Oilers had a 2-1 lead and now find themselves down 4-2. And then really the Oilers could never get back on the board after that to even cut it down to be closer. The Golden Knights ended up adding an empty netter to seal things up. Aiden Hill was outstanding between the pipes for Vegas. He's certainly shut down the Oilers. I mean, the Oilers had their chances. Draisaitl and McDavid especially generated a lot, but couldn't get any additional goals. I thought that Darnell Nurse and Cody Ceci both had a rough night defensively. Stuart Skinner had a subpar night. Jack Campbell came in the third and did well. He's done well against Vegas. He's done well in his relief appearances. I'm really surprised it didn't turn to Jack Campbell sooner for a couple of reasons. One, Stuart Skinner had a great season for them and made a lot of progress this year. But to me, it was becoming more and more apparent that he was just out of gas. It was not used to this workload. And Campbell has a phenomenal record against Vegas. And when he had done previous relief appearances, he actually had done well. I understand the trust factor was not overly strong given how his regular season went, but at the end of the day, he's being paid to be the starting goaltender. In big moments, has way more experience. Same sort of scenario in Florida, where Alex Lyon was playing well, got the thing started for Florida, and then in the big game, big moments, Paul Maurice turned to Bobrovsky, and there was a lot of uncertainty there. Is what Bob are we getting? But now look at where things are at. Whereas maybe they could have turned to Campbell sooner. Maybe he could have turned out the same sort of story. I can't say that now. It's easy to look back and play off what ifs, but if I were the coach, I think I would have tried it, to be honest. But I guess moving forward, the Oilers definitely going to be facing some changes, which we're going to talk about here in a few moments. But Darnell Nurse, man, to me, is that not the worst contract in the NHL? That is a huge overpayment, and he has a lot of money, a lot of years left on that contract. And he's not even your top power play quarterback. Like most defensemen, they get paid the big bucks, because they're power play quarterbacks and run a large part of the offense. And he doesn't even do that for them anymore, with Evan Bouchard being your primary guy in that respect. CC was, I thought, really good for the Oilers last year. Struggled this year. I don't know. I'm not sure. Surely he's a huge part of the issue, but I don't know. At the end of the day, the Oilers do need to make some changes. I'm not sure how deep those changes are going to go, but they definitely need at least a few tweaks to see if they can get over this hump. As I mentioned, tonight we have Game 7 between the Kraken and the Dallas Stars. Seattle's been surprising all the way through. This is their second Game 7 of the playoffs this year. Of course, this is the first time being in the playoffs, so their second straight series to start their franchise. Dallas will be the home team, so they will have that to their advantage. They have played well at home. Jake Oettinger he hasn't had a great playoffs, but he hasn't really had back-to-back really bad performances. He tends to bounce back well. So I still think Dallas is favored, but as like I said before, nothing would surprise me in this one. Wouldn't be shocked if we have expansion cousins Vegas against Seattle in the Western Conference Final, which I don't think anybody really would have predicted at the beginning of the season, considering as well they both had a lot of uncertainty and goaltending issues. And since goaltending is such a huge part of winning and playoff success, I would have never predicted this. Grubauer hasn't been the most steady and consistent for the Kraken, although he's playing well in the playoffs. Vegas had all the goaltending injuries, and look at how many different guys have been between the pipes this year, yet here they are. So they've done well, and we'll see what happens tonight to create the fourth member of the Final Four in the NHL Stanley Cup playoffs. Now on to the rumor section, and there's lots to cover here. Let's start with ownership in Ottawa. Today is the deadline day, so Monday, May 15th. This afternoon is the cutoff for binding bids to be submitted. We know there's been upwards of 6-7 groups showing serious interest that had already been involved in the process in the early stages before. It's believed, of course, we had heard the news back, I think it was the middle of last week or something, that Ryan Reynolds and his Remington group were likely out. We haven't heard that anything has changed, so that's still accurate to the best of our knowledge. Bruce Garriock of the Ottawa Sun and TSN is confirming to his sources that there are at least 3 bids. There's 2 other groups that were unknown if they were placing a bid or not, but at least 3, and the 3 that were all very deep pockets, very worthy groups of being under consideration. We're looking at the Michael Anlauer group, the Nico Sparks group, and the Jeff and Michael Kimmel group. So all 3 of these groups are they have some sort of local ties. They have lots of money, lots of big plans. So we'll see. And there's 2 other groups in the mix that were heavily involved, and the owner of the Sacramento Kings kind of surfaced late as well, although he's not really known as a great owner in the NBA. So I don't know. Lots of people can't say with any certainty that he's going to place a bid at all. But we'll see what happens. We should hopefully have some more clarity and information on this in the next few days. I'm not sure how long that's going to take before they review these bids and say, okay, you're the highest bidder, you're the preferred. You have an exclusive window now to close the sale. Hopefully it doesn't take too long so that there can be some answers given to the team and to the fan base. In Calgary, they have a GM vacancy that we're obviously waiting to see what happens with. Interim GM and new president, Don Maloney, working to find their new person. Lots of talk about internal candidates like Craig Conroy being in the mix, but they're certainly looking at everything, including lots of external candidates. I know Frank Saravalli made it known on Twitter today that he believes that the Calgary Flames are going to seek permission to speak with assistant GM in the Toronto Maple Leafs organization, Brandon Pridham. And of course, he is Kyle Dubas' right-hand man, who basically is the cap gymnastics guy. And he's the guy that makes the cap work. He's their cap specialist. Many give him credit for writing all the loopholes in the CBA. He's very creative that way, and has been an AGM for a while. So certainly not a huge surprise that at some point he's going to seek opportunity to move up and be a GM, and that may not happen in Toronto, given how everything goes there. We don't know if Dubas is going to stay, which we're going to talk about again here in a little bit, but Reno is looking that way. But that's one name mentioned by Frank Saravalli to keep an eye on. It doesn't mean the Leafs have to give permission, no, but they will seek permission according to Frank Saravalli. Elliot Friedman mentioned a couple names on the podcast, 32 Thoughts podcast came out today. He mentions Sean Burke as a potential candidate, and also mentioned possibility of Marc Bergevin as well. So we'll see. There's lots of experienced people out there. Some would be new to the role. Some have previous experience that could be interesting for Calgary to look at. I still kind of wonder and think Kerry Conroy might be the preferred, front runner here, but we'll see what happens. So they want to take their time, but they don't want to take too long to get this situation right. Now, the other big thing that's going on this week, and tomorrow is a big day, is the Arizona Coyotes situation with their Tempe arena situation. Now, Friedman and Merrick also discussed this on the 32 Thoughts podcast today, talking about how that's going to go. And Elliott was talking that he feels like a lot of the polls that have been out there are not reliable. You've seen too many scenarios, and not just this, but in several other, kind of elections and everything where people are being polled that when they're, when it doesn't mean anything and they're just being polled for these types of reasons, that they're not always honest and you don't always get a good indication. And we've seen cases where things have turned out very differently than polls have indicated that they were looking like. So doesn't want to put a lot of stock into those, even though local people and the people invested with the Coyotes certainly make it sound like they feel like there's lots of support and that it's going to pass. But certainly, the city council there in Tempe did their part to get on board with the project, and then it was put to a public referendum. And of course, the local people have the right to vote on that. And tomorrow, I believe, is the deadline to get their votes submitted. So we should have clarity here in the next couple of days to how this is going to work out. And one of the big questions, though, is what if it doesn't pass? I mean, Friedman said if it comes back as a yes vote and there's support for it, then he would hope that the Coyotes would then put out a statement and move forward saying, okay, thank you very much for your support. Here's our vision and our plan. This is when we feel the project will be ready. Expect the Coyotes to move into their new arena in whatever time frame, maybe 3 years' time or whatever they estimate in that regard. They said one advantage, of course, that they have in Arizona as compared to a lot of other markets in Canada or even within the different parts, especially in the north or northern part of the U.S., the central and eastern parts especially, is you don't have harsh winters. So they can have build things faster because of the weather down there as well. So that's one advantage. Theoretically, they should be able to get an arena or anything built a little bit sooner than they could, say, in Boston or anywhere in the eastern part of Canada especially. So we will see what that could be something that might be good. But what if the answer is no? That's the big question everybody wants to know, is what if the answer is no? Are they doomed? Are they going to have to move? What happens next? And the big thing they talked about was Friedman feels that, of course, Bettman's going to make another last-ditch effort to keep the team in Arizona. He's been doing it for 30 years. Why not keep it going? That at this point, that they may go back and talk to the new owner of the Phoenix Suns and to see if they can't strike a deal to share an arena with them. That obviously there would have to be, that arena would have to be kind of redone or obviously made for NHL hockey, but that would probably be easier than starting from scratch. And at this point, it's not really known that they'd have any other opportunities on their own to go build an arena somewhere that they feel would be, put the team in a place to be successful. So obviously they would try to strike a partnership there. Elliott feels it would be their next step. And if they're not receptive or that just doesn't work out, then they're going to have to start looking at relocating. I mean, obviously they have a deal to play at ESU for some time, so it's not like they absolutely have to move bang and go into a new arena. Lickety split. They could be, if an arena needs renovating or anything to be ready, but they have a new ownership stake in a new city, they could probably work that out. So at the end of the day, the big question here is, what if it's no? We don't have reason to say it's going to be no, but that's the big thing that's making everybody curious, and it's curious to hear all the different takes about potential expansion here down the road. Now, there's some rumors regarding the Oilers and the Leafs. Let's start with Toronto. We'll finish with Edmonton. We've talked a lot about Toronto in the last couple of days. Leaf players were certainly speaking to the media earlier today. According to Friedman and Merrick, they believe Kyle Dubas is going to be back. That they said that Larry Tannenbaum wanted to put forth an extension for Dubas last offseason, but of course, he only owns 25% of the team, whereas the other 75% is split between the two major telecoms, of course, Bell and Rogers. So he had just do whatever he wants. He was overruled by the telecoms, and then after there, people who have to say no extensions are going to be granted to this time. But then earlier this year, especially after having another strong regular season, and then after beating the Lightning, he feels negotiations picked up, and at this point, as long as they can come to terms on an agreement, that they expect Dubas to remain the GM of the Maple Leafs, which might be why Brendan Shanahan is not speaking today. He's supposed to be speaking sometime later this week, which might allow time for more decisions to be made that he could announce. They also said they don't expect Shanahan to be going anywhere as well. He still has 2 years left on his contract, and after dishing out $25 million to Mike Babcock to not work for them anymore, he doesn't think that MLSE, even though they have deep pockets, would want to pay yet another high-profile member of their executive team for a couple of years to not work for them anymore. So expect Shanahan to stay. good chance that Dubas stays as long as there's no issues with the contract extension. The one big thing Dubas is going to want is a little bit more autonomy on decisions. So obviously, some things still have to go through Shanahan, and he's going to want a little bit more say to do things more freely. So Kyle Dubas has spoken to the media now, and he has indicated that there's no chance he's going to be popping up going to another NHL team in the next week or so. Obviously, addressing some of the rumors about other teams maybe having interest in him if he leaves Toronto or becomes an unrestricted free agent executive. So he certainly says that this past season has been quite taxing on he and his family, and that he wants to consult with his family greatly before making any future decisions. Says he's had a great long relationship with Brendan Shanahan and the ownership group of the Toronto Maple Leafs, and that they're going to be talking to them as well in the coming days, consulting with his family, and basically deciding if he's if he gets an offer from the Leafs, and if so, he's going to accept it. But don't expect Kyle Dubas to pop up on another team as a GM, toot sweet type of thing. If he does not sign with the Toronto Maple Leafs and continue to be the general manager, expect Kyle Dubas, based on those comments, to take some time off and spend some time with family before deciding his next move. But one very, very interesting quote when he was asked about, and saying in the past, this came from Pierre LeBrun, saying, in the past you've been pretty supportive of the core four guys, not wanting to trade any of them. At this point, has anything changed? Would you consider a big move of that nature? Basically, the kind of, I'm certainly not word for word on what LeBron's question was, but in a nutshell, what he asked. And Dubas' answer was quite, interesting when he said that, obviously he said that the team that has played in Florida was a prime example of a team that, decided they needed to make a change, and they made a big move last year. And he said that he wouldn't take anything off the table between, the spring and summer into next fall, leading into the next Toronto Maple Leafs season if he continues on to be the general manager. So, as we've speculated about possibly seeing a big move within the core four, I don't think we can rule it out. The language and the verbiage used by Dubas is certainly different in this quote than we've seen in it before, where it's been nothing but supportive, saying, no, there will not be trades. Those guys are staying put. He was obviously a little bit less committed to say something like that here today, which could prove telling and could prove to see that we might actually finally see a big change within the Leafs organization should Dubas return as general manager. They both agree, though, Friedman and Merrick, that the signing an extension of Austin Matthews is an absolute top priority. Matthews did say today that his intention was to re-up and to stay in Toronto, and he really likes playing there. But keep in mind, players are never going to come out and say, yeah, I'm not going to sign, or yeah, I hate it here. They don't do that. So, yes, I know people get excited when they feel reassured they're going to stay and all that. And I'm not saying he's leaving. I'm just saying that I never take anything players say to the media at face value, because they're not going to tell you their true feelings if they're having, thoughts about going somewhere else, so they might want to leave or something like that. They're just not going to do it. So I just don't put a lot of stock into it. But I don't think Matthews wants to leave. But they did say that they don't think he's going to want to sign long-term, like a 7-8 year deal, that he's likely going to be looking for probably like a 4-year deal for max money and be the league's highest paid player, which certainly is going to, again, have a big impact on their salary cap with these small increases we've seen in recent years. That's going to hurt that way. Do they want to do that? They feel like the Leafs are okay with making him the highest paid player, because the shorter the term, the higher the AAV. And to me, I don't know, after lack of playoff success for 7 years, you got to start wondering what they're going to pay these guys and what's justified. I don't know, but that's what they believe, is that Matthews will likely sign an extension. He said he'd like to have it done before the season starts, which is reassuring to the fan base, and likely going to be a shorter-term deal, 4 or 5 years, and we'll see if they can get that done. Might be the league's highest paid player once it kicks in. They talked a bit about some of the UFAs, most notably guys like Michael Bunting. They feel are a good chance won't be back, just because he's going to be able to command more money elsewhere, and he might want a different place to play. Not that he doesn't like Toronto, he's from there, but obviously at this point, it's going to be hard for him to turn down money. And for him to stay in Toronto, he'd likely have to take a big discount. And Bunting himself even confirmed that throughout the entire season, and up to this point so far, there have been no negotiations on an extension. So, doesn't mean he's gone for sure, but it doesn't look good. It seems like the odds are slim, considering what he'll be able to come in on the open market. They also feel like guys like Kerfoot and Hall are pretty much gone. They will try to bring back Luke Shen. They will try to bring back David Camp, Brian O'Reilly. Hard to say if they'll be successful. All of them boils down to money, of course, but they would have interest and they'll talk. They feel like the goals that they tandem next year likely is Samsonov and Wall, and they'll find a way to move on from Matt Murray. They'll offer an incentive to a team to take Murray by adding like a draft pick or something to that effect. That they don't feel like they would want to buy him out. That wouldn't really fit their cap situation, but either way, they don't think Murray's going to be with the Maple Leafs next year. But as far as trades go, they talked about some different scenarios, and the one that they feel might be more likely actually would be, even though I said I didn't think it made any sense, they thought maybe a William Nylander trade might be the way that the Leafs go if they really want to change the core four and they really want to change the wiring of this team, the DNA of the core four, like we've been talking about. For example, we know Tavares isn't going anywhere, as I've talked about. Big money, the full trade, not going anywhere. If Matthews, you don't want to trade Matthews anyway, but you sign him, then it's either going to be Barner or Nylander. There's no doubt. But if they want to trade a core four member, it has to be one of those two guys. And they said that they thought, or Friedman thought, that Nylander might be more open to it and be like, listen, I've had a career season, and I'm so only I can bump down the power play too. I'm never going to be more than the fourth guy here. Maybe I like an opportunity to be a bigger role on another team. And that's just Friedman wondering, but we'll see. I know Merrick mentioned the Colorado Avalanche as being a great landing spot for him, given the uncertainty over Landeskog's career. He's out next season. We know that. There's uncertainty around Valeri Nichushkin. They need some high-scoring wingers, and obviously a guy like Nylander fits the bill. So they do have some interesting players there that might intrigue the Leafs. I know I see one suggestion on social media, Bowen Byram for William Nylander. That would be an interesting trade. I don't know if that would be agreeable to both sides. I know the Avalanche would probably be quite leery to move Byram, but at the same time, you got to give value to get value. I don't know, but Nylander being moved certainly is an intriguing thought. I know that lots of fans on social media seem to be talking about Nylander to the Calgary Flames. The Flames could certainly use a few changes as well. I'm not sure why all of a sudden they think they're getting Nylander, but the Flames do have some players that are on expiring deals like Nylander that might be interesting to trade. I mean, you can have players like Elias Lindholm, you have guys like Noah Hannafin, Chris Taina, like players like that they may or may not want to move or may not want to stay with Calgary. So, there could be a trade there too. So Calgary or Colorado was a couple of teams, but they both agreed that there would be enormous interest in Nylander. So if they make him available, there'll be tons of options for sure. So we'll see. At the end of the day, he's going to be getting a raise on the extension. William Nylander had an excellent season, and even though he had some big goals, and you can make an argument on the core four produced the most opportune times, but he certainly had some frustrating plays as well. And I think that's just what you're going to get with Nylander. That just seems to be who he is. You take the good with the bad, but at the end of the day, he produces a lot in the regular season and helps you get to the playoffs, which is a big part of the process here. So we'll see. But that was Friedman's thought, was that maybe Nylander might be the guy that goes, but we'll have to wait and see what happens, get better of an idea from Dubas first, and then we go to Keefe. If Keefe's going to stay, they both were reluctant to say that Keefe would be back, and they thought that there was a decent chance they may go in a different direction. But at the same time, they said basically what they'll end up doing is analyzing the market and saying, if we move on from Keefe, who's the replacement, and is there a player or a coach out there, that makes sense for us that we should go in a different direction. So we'll see. I don't know. That's interesting to see how the Leafs proceed here. In Edmonton, is Ken Holland going to be done as general manager? Lots of speculation now from the DFO Rundown and Frank Saravalli and Jason Gregor. Lots of speculation that Frank Saravalli is talking that Ken Holland might be out as GM and Steve Staios might be in. Now, this is not going to be a case of the Oilers firing Holland. He's entering the final year of his contract, and the speculation is that they may move him into a president role and move Steve Staios into the GM role. Now, Steve Staios is with the Oilers organization. Prior to being with the Oilers, he was a long-time president and general manager of the OHL's Hamilton Bulldogs. Now, part of the reason here, a couple of things. One, the Oilers are quite high on Staios, and they see him as a potential future GM, so they don't want to wait too long to promote him, make sure that they don't lose him. Secondly, like some Holland going into the final year of his deal, it'll allow him a year to be president and kind of be a mentor, so to speak, with Staios as well. before he possibly moves on, retires, what have you. I don't know what will come next for Ken Holland. There's also talk that Bob Nicholson, who I believe is CEO, he may retire as well. So there's some more talk about that. And at the end of the day, they don't want to lose Staios, so it helped them keep him. Now, Michael Allred, who I mentioned earlier, is bidding on the Ottawa Senators, is the owner of the Hamilton Bulldogs, where Staios worked for so long as president and GM. So many think that if Allred is the successful bidder in Ottawa, and that over time and in the short term here, they're probably going to want to bring in their own people to be the next GM and coach of the franchise under new ownership, that they would try to pull Steve Staios because there's lots of familiarity there from Allred and Staios, lots of success at the junior level. Who's to say he would want Staios to be the next GM of the Ottawa Senators? And that could be a possibility. So if the Oilers don't promote him soon, they could be really at risk to lose him, especially if Allred becomes a new owner of the Ottawa Senators. So we could see some changes in Edmonton. I don't think we're going to see drastic changes to the roster. There obviously will be some tweaking for sure, but at the end of the day, Ken Holland, Evans GM, might be the biggest change that we see there in the front office, and see if we get a different approach or philosophy or how things are handled if Steve Staios does indeed take over as general manager. So let me know your thoughts on all the rumors and all the news from today down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.